One other adjustment to do with the time base or the horizontal controls of the oscilloscope is called triggering. Triggering determines the voltage at which the trace crosses what we call the trigger point. Now, on this oscilloscope, the 0 of time is set down that axis, and the trigger level says I want the voltage to cross that axis at that trigger level. Let me demonstrate what I mean. Let me select the trigger menu, and I've turned on a menu for triggering. Now we're only looking at channel 1, and so our source for the trigger is channel 1, that's okay. Positive slope, that means we want to trigger with the trace going rising through that axis. If I selected negative slope, it would say I want to trigger with it going through the slope negative. If I selected both positive and negative, it would do either. So let's go back to the positive slope. And I'm currently on auto trigger as well. Let's go to normal trigger or manual trigger. Now I'm going to adjust the trigger level, which is this control here. And as I move that level up, you can see there's a second line there. There's the 0 voltage level, and that is now the trigger level voltage, and I've set the trigger level up to there. I can set the trigger level as high or as low as I want to be. I can go all the way up to there. Now most of the time we want to work with the trigger level. If we've got a nice symmetric trace, we want the trigger level to be auto set. So just running straight through the middle. Basically you press default setup and it will default to that. But there are some times when you might want to trigger off perhaps just little spikes or something like that. But you can run into problems if we set the trigger level too high. The trace never gets there, and so it never triggers properly, and we basically see nothing. If we go back to auto trigger, the trace will automatically trigger after a given amount of time. And you notice how it's drifting? That's because the trigger level is too high. The voltage never rises to this level, so the trace every time it draws across is actually drawing randomly. And it's very slightly out of phase each time, and so it looks like the trace is drifting. We have to make sure our set trigger level is somewhere between the maximum and minimum voltage. We would normally work with saying we want the trigger level to be where the trace crosses the origin. But we can set that to any level we like, as long as it's somewhere between the maximum and minimum voltage. If we go outside that range, the trace will not trigger properly and it will drift. So trigger level, not really a difficult concept, but basically leave your trigger level most of the time set right across the horizontal there, and everything will work out okay.